The apartment felt suffocating that evening, the air thick with unspoken resentments that had been building for months. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the bills spread before him, when she walked in from another late night out with her friends. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor with an irritating rhythm that seemed to mock the quietness of his solitary evening. "You're still up?" she asked, not bothering to hide the annoyance in her voice. He looked up, tired eyes meeting her impatient gaze. "We need to talk about the credit card statement. There's another $1,500 charged to restaurants and bars I've never been to." She rolled her eyes dramatically, tossing her designer purse onto the counter. "Here we go again. You're always keeping tabs, always questioning me. I'm an adult, I can spend money however I want." "It's our money," he said calmly, though his jaw tightened. "Money I earn while you've been finding yourself for the past 8 months. I'm not asking you to be a prisoner. I'm asking for basic respect and communication." "Respect?" She laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about respect? You sit here every night like some pathetic hermit while I'm actually living my life. My friends keep asking why I'm even still with you. You're boring. You're predictable. "I'm what?" he interrupted, his voice still even but with an edge she'd rarely heard before. She paused, and in that moment of hesitation, something shifted in her expression. A cruel confidence washed over her face, the kind that comes from too many cocktails and enabling friends whispering poison in her ear. "You're replaceable. Do you know that? I could replace you in 24 hours. One day. There are dozens of men who would kill to be with me." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. He felt something inside him crack, not dramatically, but like ice slowly fracturing under pressure. Years of dedication, of coming home every evening, of being faithful, of building a life together, reduced to a dismissive taunt. He stood up slowly, gathering the bills with methodical precision. "Okay." She blinked, surprised by his response. "Okay? That's all you have to say? You say you can replace me in 24 hours. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to beg. I'm not going to compete for someone who clearly doesn't value what we have." He walked past her toward their bedroom. "Go ahead. Try." "What's that supposed to mean?" she called after him, her voice now uncertain. He emerged a minute later with his wallet and keys. "It means I'm going to stay at a hotel for the week. You want to prove you can replace me so easily? The stage is yours. Go on those dates. Meet those men. Find someone better. I won't stand in your way." "You're being ridiculous," she scoffed, but there was a tremor in her voice now. "You're actually going to leave over this?" "I'm not leaving. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for, space to show me how replaceable I am. If you find someone who treats you better, who loves you more, who's more committed to building a life with you, then you'll have proven your point. And if not..." He paused at the door. "Well, that's something you'll have to figure out on your own." "Fine," she shouted as he reached for the doorknob. "Don't come crying back when you realize what you've lost. I'll have someone better by tomorrow night." He turned back one last time, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before, not anger, not hurt, but a quiet resignation. "I genuinely hope you find what you're looking for." The door closed softly behind him, and suddenly the apartment felt much larger and much emptier than she'd expected. She stood in the kitchen, her heart racing with a mixture of anger and something else she couldn't quite name. She grabbed her phone defiantly and opened her dating apps. She'd show him. She'd prove him wrong. By morning, she'd have him begging to come back. She woke up late the next morning, her head pounding from the bottle of wine she'd consumed while rage-swiping through dating apps until 3 in the morning. Her phone showed 127 new matches and countless messages, each one more eager than the last. She smiled through her hangover. See? This was going to be easier than she thought. The first message she opened read, "Hey gorgeous, you up? Come over." She deleted it. Too crude. The second, "You're hot. Want to hang out?" She cringed at the grammar and kept scrolling. The third seemed promising, "You have a beautiful smile. I'd love to take you to dinner tonight." She responded immediately, and within minutes, They'd arranged to meet at an upscale restaurant downtown. She spent the afternoon preparing, trying on 5 different outfits, perfecting her makeup, styling her hair just right. As she looked in the mirror, she pushed away the small voice reminding her that he used to tell her she looked beautiful even in sweatpants on Sunday mornings. That was different. That was boring. Tonight was exciting. The date, however, was anything but exciting. Daniel, or was it David, spent the entire dinner talking about his cryptocurrency portfolio, his luxury car lease, and his high-value male philosophy he'd learned from podcast gurus. When the check came, he made an elaborate show of paying, then immediately asked if she wanted to continue the evening at his place. "I should probably get home," she said, uncomfortable with how quickly he'd shifted gears. His demeanor changed instantly. "Seriously? I just spent $200 on dinner. You can't even." She left before he finished the sentence, feeling something cold settle in her stomach. She told herself it was just bad luck. The next one would be better. The next one wasn't better. Neither was the one after that. By day 3, she'd been on 7 dates, and each one blurred into a disappointing pattern. They were interested in her appearance, in her availability, in what she could offer them that evening. But none of them asked about her dreams, her fears, her thoughts on anything meaningful. One particularly handsome match took her to an expensive club where he spent more time taking selfies and checking his phone than talking to her. Another seemed perfect until he mentioned his wife halfway through drinks, proposing a discreet arrangement. One wanted to split the check after ordering the most expensive items on the menu. Another brought her back to his apartment only for her to discover he lived with 3 roommates in conditions that suggested they'd never heard of cleaning products. Between dates, she posted carefully curated photos on social media, pictures of restaurant meals, cocktails, sunset views, each one crafted to suggest she was living her best life. Her friends commented with fire emojis and encouraging messages. "You're thriving. He's probably so jealous. Show him what he's missing." But late at night, when she came home to the empty apartment, the silence felt accusatory. She'd catch herself almost calling out to tell him about something funny that happened, only to remember he wasn't there. The apartment looked the same, but felt different. She noticed things she'd taken for granted, how he'd always left the hallway light on for her, how he'd stocked her favorite tea, how he'd fixed the leaky faucet she complained about months ago. On day 4, she matched with someone who seemed genuinely different. Ryan was articulate, charming, and actually asked her questions about herself. Their conversation flowed naturally. She felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this was it, the person who would prove she'd been right all along. They met for coffee, and it started wonderfully. He was attentive, interesting, and made her laugh. As they walked through the park afterward, she felt herself relaxing for the first time in days. Then his phone rang. He glanced at it and his expression shifted. "I'm sorry, I need to take this," he said, stepping away. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could read his body language, the way his shoulders tensed, the apologetic tone. When he returned, he looked genuinely regretful. "That was my ex-girlfriend," he admitted. "Well, sort of ex. It's complicated. We've been on and off for 3 years. Look, you seem amazing, but I don't think I'm in a place to start something new right now. I'm really sorry." She nodded numbly, understanding dawning. Even the good ones were unavailable, still tangled in their own complications, unable to offer anything real. That night, she lay in bed scrolling through the messages from dozens of men, each one offering attention but nothing substantial. Quantity, she was learning, was not the same as quality. By day 5, exhaustion had settled into her bones, not just physical tiredness from late nights and constant socializing, but a deeper weariness that came from maintaining a facade that was crumbling faster than she could rebuild it. She deleted the dating apps twice only to reinstall them an hour later, compulsively checking for some message that might validate her impulsive declaration. Her best friend, Jasmine, called that afternoon. "How's the single life treating you? Your Instagram looks incredible." She forced enthusiasm into her voice. "It's been amazing. So many options, you know." "That's what you deserve, girl. Men are literally disposable. You were right. You can replace him in 24 hours. Jasmine laughed, the sound grating against her raw nerves. So which one are you getting serious with? The question landed like a punch. Getting serious? She hadn't thought about that. She'd been so focused on proving a point that she hadn't considered what came after the validation. I'm keeping my options open, she deflected. No need to rush into anything. After hanging up, she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes despite the concealer. She looked tired. She looked unhappy. When had that happened? Her phone buzzed with another message. You busy tonight? Netflix and chill. She didn't even remember matching with this person. She blocked him and threw her phone onto the couch. The apartment felt oppressively empty. She noticed his things still scattered around, his favorite coffee mug in the cupboard, his books on the shelf, his jacket hanging by the door. She'd been so certain she wanted him gone, but now these remnants felt like artifacts from a lost civilization she'd burned down without considering what would grow in its place. That evening, she did something she'd been avoiding. She actually went out alone, without the armor of a date, without the performance of social media. She walked to the small Italian restaurant 3 blocks away, the one they used to go to every Friday night. The owner recognized her. Where is your husband? Maria asked, the concern evident in her heavily accented voice. We're taking a break, she managed. Maria's face fell. Oh no. He was such a good man. Always so patient with you, always making sure you were happy. She patted her hand. I hope you work it out. Good men are rare these days. The words stung because they rang true. She ate her pasta alone, watching couples around her share meals, share laughter, share comfortable silences. She observed how they interacted, the small gestures of care, the inside jokes, the easy intimacy that came from truly knowing someone. None of her dates had offered anything close to that. They'd offered excitement, novelty, attention, but not partnership. Her phone buzzed again. Another match asking for photos. She felt sick. On day 6, she found herself going through their old photos together. There she was, laughing at something he'd said during a hiking trip. There they were at her sister's wedding, his arm around her waist, looking at her instead of the camera. There was the photo from when they'd first moved into this apartment, both exhausted and happy, surrounded by boxes and possibility. When had she stopped seeing him? When had the man who'd held her hair back when she was sick, who'd driven 4 hours in the middle of the night because she'd called crying about her father's health scare, who'd learned to cook her grandmother's recipes just to make her feel at home, when had he become invisible to her? She remembered their anniversary 6 months ago. He'd planned a whole day, breakfast in bed, a visit to the art museum she'd been wanting to see, dinner at that new restaurant, then a walk along the river where they'd first met. She'd been annoyed because she'd wanted to go out with her friends that night. She'd accused him of being controlling, of not respecting her independence. He'd simply said okay and put away the reservation confirmation. The memory made her chest tight. How many other gestures had she dismissed? How many times had he tried to connect while she'd pulled away, always looking for something more exciting, something that validated her in ways she couldn't even articulate? She picked up her phone and scrolled through the messages from the past week. Hundreds of men, thousands of words, and not one of them had asked her how her day really was. Not one had remembered something she'd mentioned in passing. Not one had looked at her like she was the answer to a question they'd been asking their whole lives. He used to look at her like that. When had she stopped appreciating it? That night, the silence of the apartment became unbearable. She called him. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. His voice, calm, familiar, asked her to leave a message. She opened her mouth to speak, but pride choked the words. She hung up. She'd wanted to prove a point. She'd wanted to show him she was desired, wanted, irreplaceable. But all she'd proven was that attention wasn't the same as affection, that options weren't the same as connection, that being wanted by everyone meant nothing if none of them truly wanted to know her. The week wasn't even over, and she already knew the truth she'd been running from. She'd had something real, and she'd gambled it away for a fantasy that didn't exist. By day 7, she'd stopped pretending. No more dates, no more apps, no more carefully filtered photos suggesting a life of liberation and excitement. She'd spent the morning cleaning the apartment, touching his things with a reverence she'd never shown when he was there. His favorite coffee mug felt heavy in her hands, weighted with regret. She practiced her apology speech in the mirror, but the words felt inadequate. "I'm sorry" seemed too small for the magnitude of what she'd done, what she'd said, what she'd thrown away in a moment of cruel arrogance. How do you apologize for reducing someone's love to something replaceable? How do you take back words designed to wound? Around noon, she heard his key in the lock. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the door opened. He stepped inside, and she was struck by how different he looked. Not physically, he wore the same jeans and casual shirt he always wore, but there was something changed in his posture, in his expression. He looked lighter, peaceful. "Hi," he said simply, setting his bag down. "Hi." Her voice cracked. "Hi. I'm glad you're back. We need to talk." He nodded slowly, but didn't move closer. "Okay." She'd prepared an elaborate speech, but standing before him, everything she'd rehearsed evaporated. The tears came first, hot and unbidden, streaming down her face as reality crashed over her. "I was wrong," she choked out. "About everything. I went on those dates like I said I would. I matched with so many people. I went out every night. And you know what I learned?" She wiped her eyes roughly. "None of them were you. None of them even came close. They wanted things from me, but none of them wanted me. Not really. Not like you did." He listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. "I was so stupid," she continued, words tumbling out desperately. "I took everything for granted. Your patience, your kindness, the way you always put us first. I convinced myself I deserved more excitement, more passion, more. I don't even know what. But all those things I thought were boring? They weren't boring. They were stability. They were love. They were real." She stepped closer, reaching for his hand, but he didn't reciprocate the gesture. His hand remained at his side. "Please," she whispered. "I know I hurt you. I know what I said was unforgivable. But I'm begging you for another chance. I see clearly now. I understand what I had, what we had. I won't take it for granted ever again. I'll be better. I'll be the partner you deserved all along." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. She watched his face, desperate for any sign of softening, any indication that her words were reaching him. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "Do you know what I did this week?" She shook her head, confused by the question. "The first night, I sat in that hotel room and I cried. I won't lie about that. I thought about all the ways I might have failed you, all the things I could have done differently. I wondered if you were right, if I really was boring, predictable, replaceable." He paused, taking a breath. But then something shifted. "The second day, I woke up without the weight of walking on eggshells. Without wondering if something I did would trigger another argument. Without that constant anxiety of not being enough." Her stomach dropped. "I went to the gym. I called my brother. We talked for 2 hours about things I'd stopped sharing because you said my family was too demanding. I went to a concert I'd wanted to see. I cooked meals I enjoyed. I read a book uninterrupted. I remembered who I was before I became so focused on trying to make you happy that I forgot about my own happiness." "But we can be happy together," she interjected desperately. "Now that I understand." He held up a hand gently. "You understand now because you faced consequences. You understand because the grass wasn't greener. But what about next time? What about when things get routine again, when the excitement of reconciliation fades, when you start wondering again if there's something better out there?" "There isn't," she insisted. "I know that now." "Maybe," he said softly. "But I spent this week discovering something important. I don't need someone who only values me after testing the alternatives. I don't need someone who threatens to replace me when they're angry. I need someone who chooses me even when things are boring, even when life is routine, even when temptation whispers that something better might exist." "I'm choosing you now," she said, her voice breaking. "You're choosing me because the other options disappointed you. The truth of his words hit like a physical blow. She wanted to argue, to insist that wasn't true, but deep down, she knew he was right. The afternoon sun filtered through the apartment windows, casting long shadows that seemed to physically represent the distance growing between them. She sat on the couch, tissues scattered around her, watching him move through the space with quiet purpose as he began to gather more of his belongings. Each item he packed felt like another piece of their shared history being dismantled. "I love you," she said, the words desperate and raw. "Doesn't that matter?" He paused, holding a framed photo of them from 2 years ago, back when her smile reached her eyes when she looked at him. "It does matter. I believe you do love me, or at least you love the security and stability I represented. But love isn't enough when respect is missing. You didn't just say you could replace me in a moment of anger." That statement came from somewhere deeper, from a place where you genuinely stopped valuing what we built together. "People make mistakes," she pleaded. "People say things they don't mean when they're angry." "You're right. But there's a difference between saying something hurtful in the heat of the moment and actually meaning it enough to act on it. You didn't just say it, you were eager to prove it. You couldn't wait to show me how replaceable I was." His voice remained calm, matter-of-fact, which somehow hurt more than anger would have. She thought back to that first night, how quickly she'd grabbed her phone, how satisfied she'd felt seeing all those matches and messages. He was right. She'd wanted to prove her point. She'd wanted to hurt him. "I've been thinking about the last year," he continued, folding a sweater methodically. "All those nights you went out with friends who encouraged you to see me as an obstacle rather than a partner. All those times you rolled your eyes when I suggested spending time together. The way you describe our relationship to others, always focusing on what was missing rather than what was there. I kept trying to be more exciting, more spontaneous, more whatever I thought you needed. But it was never going to be enough because the problem wasn't me. It was that you'd stopped choosing us." "I'll choose us now," she whispered. "Every day. I swear." He finally looked directly at her, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than anger or hurt, pity mixed with resolution. "Here's what I learned this week. I deserve someone who doesn't need to lose me to appreciate me. I deserve someone who values loyalty, consistency, and commitment as much as excitement. I deserve someone who sees boring evenings at home as intimacy rather than imprisonment." "We can work on this," she tried again, standing up. "We can go to counseling. I'll change. I'll prove it to you. I don't want you to change for me. I want you to change for yourself. But that's work you need to do on your own." He zipped his bag and faced her fully. "I spent 3 years of my life trying to be enough for someone who was always looking for something more. I'm tired. I'm tired of trying to prove my worth. I'm tired of feeling like I'm in a constant audition for a role that can be recast at any moment." The finality in his voice made her knees weak. "So that's it. You're just giving up on us." "I'm not giving up. I'm choosing myself. There's a difference." He moved toward the door, then turned back one last time. "I hope you find what you're looking for. I genuinely do. I hope you figure out why external validation became more important than genuine connection. I hope you learn to appreciate stability before you're too old to find it again. But I can't be the person who waits around while you figure that out. Please," she sobbed, the word barely intelligible. "Please don't leave. I can't do this without you." His expression softened slightly, but his resolve didn't waver. "That's the thing, you can. You're stronger than you think. You just spent a week proving you could get attention from dozens of people. Now maybe spend some time figuring out why that attention felt hollow. Why none of it filled the space you were trying to fill." He opened the door, and she watched her last chance walking away. "Wait," she called out, her voice small. Can we at least talk in a few months? When I've worked on myself. When I've proven I've changed." He stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, and she was struck by how much this moment mirrored the night he'd left a week ago. Except now, the roles felt reversed. Now, she was the one desperate to hold on while he was the one finding freedom in letting go. "Maybe," he said finally, but they both knew it was the kind of maybe that meant no. "But don't change for me. Don't work on yourself with the goal of winning me back. Do it because you deserve to be a better version of yourself. Do it because the person you were this past year, the one who dismissed kindness as weakness and stability as boring, that person wasn't happy either. You were just looking for happiness in all the wrong places. I see that now, she whispered. I know you do. But seeing it and actually changing are different things. That takes time and work and honesty with yourself that can't happen while you're trying to win someone back. He gave her a sad smile. Take care of yourself. The door closed with a soft click that echoed like thunder in the empty apartment. She stood frozen, staring at that closed door, waiting for it to open again, waiting for him to change his mind. But minutes passed, then an hour, and the door remained closed. Finally, she sank to the floor, her back against the couch, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd lost. Not just him, but the life they'd built, the future they'd planned, the person she'd been when someone loved her unconditionally. She'd thrown it all away to prove a point that had only proven her wrong. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Another match, another message, another stranger offering empty attention. She picked up the phone, stared at it for a long moment, then deleted every dating app. The constant stream of validation had become nauseating. She finally understood what he'd been trying to tell her. Being wanted by everyone meant nothing if she didn't know how to value being loved by someone. The apartment felt different now, not just empty, but hollow. All the things that had felt like chains now revealed themselves as anchors. The routine Friday dinners had been tradition. The quiet evenings had been peace. The predictability had been security. She'd mistaken comfort for complacency and in her arrogance had gambled away something irreplaceable while convinced she could replace it in 24 hours. As the sun set and darkness filled the apartment, she didn't turn on the lights. She sat in that growing darkness and finally, truly began to understand the difference between attention and love, between options and commitment, between the excitement of novelty and the depth of genuine partnership. He'd said she needed to work on herself, and he was right. But as she sat there alone, she also understood the cruel irony. By the time she became the person who could truly appreciate what they'd had, he would already have found his peace without her. The week she'd spent trying to replace him had taught her an invaluable lesson. Some things, once lost, can never truly be replaced. And some mistakes, no matter how desperately you wish to undo them, become the teachers that shape the rest of your life. She'd said she could replace him in 24 hours. She'd been wrong. She'd spend years trying to find even a fraction of what she'd so carelessly thrown away. But he had already moved on. And in his moving on, he'd found something she was only beginning to understand. The peace of choosing yourself, the strength of knowing your worth, and the freedom of refusing to be anyone's backup plan.